First, Israel's Minister for Tourism has wrapped up his historic trip to Saudi Arabia. Chaim Katz was the first Israeli cabinet minister to openly and publicly visit the kingdom. He was there for a UN tourism conference, the latest in a series of steps that have made the prospect of normalization between Jerusalem and Riyadh seem closer than ever. Katz did not meet his counterpart directly, but the Saudi tourism minister, Ahmed bin Akil al-Khatib, publicly noted the presence of the Israeli delegation. He said he hoped they had enjoyed a warm welcome. Well, to talk more about all of that, we're joined here in the studio by Ruth Wasserman-Land. She's a former member of the Knesset and the former co-chair of the Abraham Accords Parliamentary Caucus. So this is something very close to your heart, of course.
I'm trying to keep my excitement, in a appropriate way. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable to see an Israeli minister and publicly, unapologetically in Saudi Arabia.
Well, Ruth, it's great to have you with us. We're also joined tonight by Hussein Abdul Hussein. He's a research fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. It's great to see you as well, Hussein.
Thanks for having me on.
Ruth, let me come to you then. You've spoken about your excitement. It just seems to be one thing after another now, doesn't it? Because the process had seemed to have stalled for quite a while. We had Mohammed bin Salman give that interview last week, and now the first Israeli minister. Just tell us about your excitement and where you think this heads from now.
So the fact that the Crown Prince actually went out and said what he said on Fox News was the green light. This is the unapologetic implication, understanding, declaration, whatever you want to call it, that this has been decided in Riyadh. This has been decided. They want it. They are willing to publicly say it. It's really moving forward. Otherwise, he would not have come out and said it. And now it's just a matter of really fixing the negotiation, what is happening in the negotiation, and so on. There are tricky issues involving the agreement, and not only military-related ones, even though they are the only ones that are really, truly talked about. But I do want to say, still in the hope echelon, this is something that is going to completely change the Middle East and the Gulf. This is a true and utter game changer, nothing less.
Hussein, would you agree with that? And also, the Saudis have also sent their first non-resident ambassador to the Palestinian Authority. This is Naif al-Sudairi. Is this a sign that the Palestinians have realised that they need to get on board this time?
Well, it's absolutely huge. The events, the developments that are unfolding are really big. However, I'd like to point out that this is Saudi Arabia. This is not everyone coming on board, and which is good enough. I mean, I'm not trying to underestimate how big this is, but this peace will be bilateral, just the same way that Israel signed the Abraham Accords bilaterally with the UAE and with Bahrain. And if Saudi Arabia signs peace, we should not necessarily expect all the other countries to come signing. For example, Kuwait, or other Arab countries, or Indonesia, other Islamic countries. So this is only Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is acting out of national self-interest, is acting based on the new motto since MBS came to power, which says Saudi first. And we've seen this on his interview with Fox News. He was really big on pushing Saudi Arabia up the ladder of the biggest economies of the world from 15 to he's aspiring to become number 7. So this is a totally different Saudi Arabia, and with a different Saudi Arabia, of course, we expect a different relationship with Israel.
And of course, just like the Abraham Accords, this would be a US brokered agreement, this time under the Biden administration. The US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is due to visit Israel, according to reports. Let's go to New York. Our senior US correspondent Mike Wagenheim is there standing by. Mike, what can we expect from Sullivan?
Well, this appears to be a visit, Laura, more related to the Lechem Forum, the joint strategic forum between Israel and the United States. It's led by the respective national security advisors, Sullivan in Washington and Tzachi Hanegbi in Jerusalem. They meet every now and again, whether in person, virtually, what have you, to talk about Iran-related issues. Now, certainly, normalization is tied to Iran. To eliminate that from the picture would be foolish. Anything to do with relations with Saudi Arabia, especially when you're talking about weapons packages, defense treaties, civilian nuclear program, certainly is going to draw a reaction from Tehran one way or another. So it's all essentially incorporated, a lot of different elements within the strategic forum that Sullivan, Hanegbi, and their respective accompanying delegations are planning on talking about here. The timing, not quite sure yet. Possibly next month, which is right around the corner. It may be shifted to November. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has some foreign trips that are planned that may, interrupt that schedule. But certainly we expect in the next month and a half or so, Jake Sullivan to arrive in Israel. And by the way, Tony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, although nothing confirmed yet, heavily expected to arrive in Israel soon. And we usually see a trickle of U.S. officials come in before a visit from the Secretary of State. That might be a part of it as well, Laura.
Mike, thank you very much, Mike Wagenheim there. So, Ruth, we know the Biden administration is pushing this according to their timetable, but realistically, what kind of time frame do you expect?
I think that once MBS already gave that interview, the timeline is very short, relatively. In the Middle East, we have our own timeline. Things are very moderate and shwaya. But in this case, in particular, I absolutely agree with my counterpart, saying that there is a Saudi-first kind of a policy. It's definitely interest-based. One need not think anything otherwise, and that's perfectly legitimate. And Saudi Arabia is making no secret. It has a very, very long list of demands from Israel, but mainly from the United States. And this will be negotiated, but definitely this is something that will be also sold to the public in Saudi Arabia and basically to the entire Islamic Sunni world as something that is worthwhile. It's something that needs to be taken into account if one wants that long list of demands from the West.
And Hussein, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says this will be nothing less than the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think it'll be huge. I think we will hear many voices coming out and speaking in favor of peace, many Arab voices, that is. But I don't think that this will just put an end to everything. Even the Saudis, the way they look at this, this is modeled after the Abraham Accords. They're saying, okay, we will get to normalization and peace with Israel. This does not prejudice whatever situation there is between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So the point here is that we will sign peace, but this does not necessarily affect what's going on in the West Bank or in Gaza. And I think this makes perfect sense. People can talk and can make peace and can keep on negotiating at the same time. This is a complete reversal of how things used to be, that we get to peace first, that we agree on everything, and then we get to peace. Let's get to peace. And even as we are friends and there are peaceful relations between us, there might still be problems. And this is the way that all nations debate and have relationships with one another. Even allies sometimes have differences and have to talk over and solve these differences.
In 30 seconds, Ruth, how would you characterize what we've seen so far?
I think that it's a brilliant development. I think that economically this is a real opening. And I'd just like to say one very important thing. I think that the negotiation needs to be regional in its thinking and not just bilateral or Palestinian-Israeli conflict oriented. And that means telling the Palestinians and the Jordanians to stop the incitement in the curricula, which is part and parcel of this package. This is very, very important for the stability of the region for everyone.
Ruth Wasserman-Lander and Hussein Abdul Hussein, thank you to you both.